let's move on to agenda item 12. And I'm not sure who's taken over for that one. Deputy Superintendent Newey.
Here she comes.
We just did. That was what we just finished.
Did you have a motion for it? Spaghetti.
You're, Deputy Superintendent Newey, please.
Thank you, Chair. So we do not have any staff recommended statutory changes or funding requests. However, I believe there are some board members with motions to bring forward if you'd like to do that this time. So we have an agenda item for statutory requests, and then we have funding second. So we can do statutory first. Who's driving?
Oh, yes.
Okay, can you go to the motion doc? Greg is, and he's pulling up the motions doc that has the,
Okay.
you could email them to me and I'll add them on there.
So are we, let me just ask, so you just asked if we had statutory changes. Are we foregoing 12.1 or was it that brief? Now I'm in the same boat as Christina just was. Like, what just happened
So
here?
sorry.
Did you already cover 12.1? Or are we going to 12.2? The statutory changes. So 12.1 is information on legislative session overview.
So I apologize. My understanding was that that was going to happen tomorrow during the study session. I was going to go over like the website and the
Okay.
new bills.
Perfect.
And then,
So just so board members know then, and for me, obviously, we're not skipping this. We will readdress this. Okay.
yeah, it's on the
So
agenda for tomorrow.
Let's, we've got some lights here. If we're on 12.2, and are we ready for those, Deputy Newey?
Yes, we are.
Okay, so I have first Member Bogus, and then I have Member Davis.
So I have 10 motions. You want all of them in order? I have 10 motions.
Email them to
You
me.
want them in order? Is that what you would like? Or do you want to trade and take turns?
Well, let's get you on.
If you put them up in writing, and then if someone didn't like
Legislative, statutory.
Oh, I have them all written out.
So you have them written out. Do you want to see if we can put them up on the screen?
That's fine. Yeah, I just sent one.
Okay.
So the first one would be that, and it's coming in your email, to direct staff to work with the legislature to amend it, subsection 53E-3-511 to prohibit the board and LEAs from measuring students' non-academic knowledge, skills, and dispositions as a part of the board's student achievement backpack data collection system.
Okay, and so that's the motion. Do we need a second? A second from Member Green. Do you want to speak to this? Member Bogus?
So I think it speaks for itself. I don't think we should be measuring or storing non-academic data in centralized databases.
Okay. I see Member Davis, but are you just in the queue, or do you have a comment to this motion?
I'm in the queue. I'm just wondering what we'd store specifically.
There we go. Go ahead, ask your question.
I'm just wondering what we store specifically. If a data expert could tell us exactly what we store that is non-academic, other than attendance, which we all already know, which we use for ADM and funding. Probably Aaron. Is Aaron still here?
Yes, Scott, go ahead.
Sir, to answer the question, we store disaggregated data, or we disaggregate data from the field. The types of data that we have are listed. I mean, it's quite extensive, as you can imagine, because we have both federal and state reporting requirements. But we store disaggregated data. Some examples of data that we do not store are social security numbers. We have no reason to ask for those. So does that help answer the question? Or I can provide a list
So like
of all the
safety
different.
incidents, things like this, lots of things.
Survey data,
W- y-
questionnaires,
w-
pronouns.
Only for the time that we need that to make the next report. So that
It's not
it varies. It kind of depends on which data elements we're talking about here. Does that help answer the question? Because I can provide what data meets the definition of being stored. Is that the right word? Is that the word I heard? Kept?
Member Davis, you have a follow-up?
Is any non-academic data required to be stored in code? Or
Not-
collected or-
Not that I'm aware of, but there are
using.
some data elements that we do have to keep because we have to provide 3-year trends or 5-year trends or those types of things. And I would have to break that down for any of or all of you by what those are precisely.
Thank you. Member Lear?
I had a slightly different question, Scott, to Scott probably too. Is that okay? So we were just talking about information, and because as I understood Christina's motion, and it is prohibit the board from measuring student non-academic knowledge, skills, and dispositions as part of the board's student achievement backpack.
Yeah.
Does that include information coming from LEAs? So that's a question first to the maker of the motion. Member Bogus?
Member Bogus, you have a response?
Does that include information coming from LEAs?
Is that a question for me, Chair? Or?
No, I'm sorry. I was
Okay.
asking Christina
Oh,
first that,
okay.
and then I
Right.
have a.
Okay.
Once I get that
Gotcha.
So-
answer.
I got you.
As it's written, the answer would be no, but it prevents us from measuring students' non-academic knowledge, skills, and dispositions. There's nothing in this about storage. We can't store it if we're not measuring it.
But we can't measure it unless we get it from LEAs either.
True, but we don't want to measure their non-academic knowledge, skills, or dispositions.
And yet we
And so it
just-
wouldn't apply
Right.
to things like attendance, because that's not a knowledge, skill, or disposition.
Okay.
Knowledge disposition, but then, so attendance, what about bullying incidents? What about?
Oh, sorry.
What about things like, all of these that would be maintained by LEAs? Any kinds of IEP information, 504 information on students?
So it goes to knowledge, skills, and disposition. Non-academic knowledge, non-academic skills, and non-academic dispositions. None of the things you mentioned are knowledge, skills, or dispositions.
It seems like non-academic knowledge might be behavior.
I would disagree respectfully, because a behavior incident is not knowledge.
So what would be and what would be, and I'm just trying to understand the motion. I'm not trying to badger or pick on anybody. And so maybe, Scott, you're off the hook for a minute because I'm more concerned about the motion, but what would be an example of non-academic knowledge or skill? Non-academic skills would be CTE certificates.
No, they would be things like grit, tenacity, things that LEAs are labeling as skills, and they're non-academic skills. Fortitude, character, character counts data. It's a non-academic knowledge, skill, or disposition.
Okay. I'm
I hope that answers your question.
Well, no, I mean, it's sort of, but I just can't see how any of that is ever stored in any way other than citizenship grades for students are, I would say, sort of what you're just talking about.
Well, and I understand that they're doing them, but This is not that. It's preventing the board from measuring them.
And we wouldn't measure them other than receiving them from, unless we needed them from LEAs if we were asked to provide data by the legislature. We wouldn't have any data independent of LEAs. So our storage would only be if we were asked to get that information. So I'm just trying to process what this could ever be, and that's, yes, you were sort of helpful, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Member Lear. Vice Chair Hart?
So I've thought about the student data backpack and because it's bandied about, we've been up to administrative rules to talk about our progress on student data backpack. It's, I think, 11 years old. I'm actually, my interest would be a little bit more expansive than this, in that I would like to see everything that's currently in code that to be re-looked at by the legislature. It would be a request that everything that's in code that's listed to be part of the student data backpack, and for the student data backpack elements to be reconsidered by legislature. 11 years ago, there were some pretty interesting things that we thought we needed to include. Are you pulling them up? I didn't know if you were pulling up that student data backpack or somebody. You don't have to, but my point is, and I think I'm going to go a little bit out on a limb. The last I checked, I think it was the student data backpack, that what was carried in a student's backpack was their teacher's credentials. So like 11 years ago, so if I taught a student in the 3rd grade, my teacher credentials get carried with that student in their data backpack. And I'm not so sure that's something that I'm not sure I support that. I'm not sure that that would still be supported in the legislature. I would like to, I understand what this is, but if we're going to talk about student data backpack, I would actually like the elements that are to be collected in the student data backpack to be reviewed by a committee for appropriateness. I mean, I think that's something that the Education Legislative Committee I'd like them to consider that as a policy. I don't. Well, I don't want to dilute the. And I think that you have great ideas. Yeah, no, I don't want to take away, because I understand this is going at something different. But I also believe, in that same vein of student data backpack, that it's not just this I've got concerns about. I've got concerns about what is in the data backpack, because if you ask any 2 legislators, they give you different answers.
Thank you. Member Earl?
Yeah, it's under that code, and it is, as you're saying, Vice Chair Hart, it's section attendance, name of the student's teacher for classes and courses, teacher qualifications for a student's teacher, including years of experience, degree, license, endorsements, results of statewide assessment, a student's writing sample, student scroll scores, a student's performance reported, and then it gives the accountability system, and then results of benchmark assessments, a student's reading level at the end of 3rd grade. That's what it lists. That's what it's listing. In that part, yeah, there might be other provisions up higher too.
So are there dispositions? Yes. In code?
So are we, are
So-
we on this motion still?
So what I would like to do is, in order to make sure that this motion is a complete motion, I think we actually have to go back and look at everything that's supposed to be in that data backpack, because this might just be one slice of the orange, and we may need it to be even more expansive. That's my concern, is that we just take a slice and it's only a tiny little bit, and that there's more things that would need to go even in this part. But I also want to make an additional motion regarding the student data backpack. But I'm worried that we go down the
when we talk about non-academic knowledge, skills, and disposition, I'm worried that legislators read that and then look at what's in code, and they don't think that what we think is qualifies as that. If that's not the same definition, then we're not going to get what we want, is my worry. Does that make sense?
You're saying it doesn't fully make sense to me, no. Because I think I would call your concerns non-academic information, and mine is directly tied to things that are being ascribed the idea of knowledge, skills, or dispositions. So I am thinking things like survey data. Again, fortitude on a corporate skills rubric. There's a lot, I'm going to shut up. There's lots of things I could talk
And
about.
so if you're not worried that something would be missed by describing it this way, then my motion would be separate. If my concern is we are at the mercy of how they define what you've said, rather than saying individual things that are already in code. So I was just, if we wanted to expand it, we could, but given that, let's just move forward with yours, and then I'll do a separate one.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you would like to, I don't think it would be grossly inappropriate to say because I'm actually preventing us from measuring it. You're trying to prevent the storage and passage of it.
That's why it's different, and if.
So I think we're.
Yeah,
but,
it's.
But you could say measuring non-academic information, but I just don't know that it bears in the same realm, Vice Chair Hart.
No worries. I just wanted to
But
say that one's coming, so if
I would
somebody.
support that motion as well. I think you've got a privacy issue there for educators, among other things.
you
but
do.
Yeah.
So, I'll get it ready.
Okay, so the motion before the board then. Oh, Superintendent, please, yes.
No, I apologize, Member Bogus, if I may, Chair, address Member Bogus. I just had a thought come to me, Member Bogus, regarding like work-based learning. And so sometimes when kids are engaged in work-based learning and getting graded, some of those durable skills, like are they working as part of a team? You know, they might measure teamwork or attendance or, you know, punctuality or the durable skills that we hear employers talk a lot about, and those may come into play for grades, for example, with work-based learning. So I just want to clarify, this would not prohibit LEAs from measuring some of those things as part of, for example, a student with an IEP that might be doing some skills-based learning out in the community, but those are the things are measured on, or part of work-based learning programs. Would this prohibit that? That was just the thought that came before you voted.
Thank you. Response,
May I?
please.
So I think the answer to your question is no, because we're preventing the board from measuring them. We're not preventing the LEA. And I think the second answer to your question is that, how do I want to articulate this? That while work-based learning does assess those things, there are individuals who honestly were terrible students. They were chronically absent, and now they're CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. And therein lies my concern that when we have a data backpack that ultimately will follow kids into the workforce with our data sharing agreements with workforce services and some other things, that can follow a kid, and it can be extraordinarily detrimental. And there's story after story after story of a person who finally got their stuff together. And this personally should not be, first of all, in my opinion, it should not be information that the government even has. But then when we start measuring it and storing it and putting, I just think the answer to your question is I think if LEAs are doing that as a part of an IEP, that's very different from us doing it.
Thank you. So the motion before the board.
I apologize, sir. Did I answer the superintendent's question?
Did Member Bogus answer your question?
Yes, sir. I was asking about intent, and I think the intent was clear, so thank you.
Thank you. The motion before the board is that the board directs staff to work with the legislature to amend section 53E-3-511 to prohibit the board from measuring student non-academic knowledge, skills, and dispositions as part of the board's Student Achievement Backpack data collection system. Member Davis.
My concern is that a lot of skills that are not academic are measured and recorded in IEPs. And part of why I remember Howard Stevenson getting us called up to admin rules saying, get that data backpack going. But one of the things that keeps being discussed is that we were too slow between LEAs to get IEPs to where they need to go, and that this backpack is going to help schools have the information they need to meet the needs of kids. And so we can't necessarily take that out. I mean, that's a big part of why we're doing this. So I don't know. I don't necessarily have a problem with the dispositions, especially the knowledge and skills is tricky because knowledge and skills sometimes inherently is academic. Even if you don't consider the cooking class academic, it still is. It could be considered academic because it's in a school, being taught in a school. Oh, Molly, I'm sorry. I know you're a cooking teacher. I should use a different example, but that's kind of where my concern is.
Thank you, Member Davis. So okay. So we have a motion on the floor. I don't know, do you guys want mics? What would you like to? Okay. So the motion before the board, again, is that the board directs staff to work with the legislature to amend section 53E-3-511 to prohibit the board from measuring student non-academic knowledge, skills, and dispositions as part of the board's Student Achievement Backpack data collection system. Vice Chair Wood.
Sorry. Could I ask Deputy Superintendent Voorhees your opinion? I mean, you have immense experience with IEPs and what the board collects, what we don't. Do you have any concerns with this, or can you help me better understand it?
Thank you, Chair. Leah Voorhees, Interim Deputy Superintendent. We do not collect, you do not collect IEPs. We don't have access at the state level to IEPs. We have to go to LEAs and generally to schools, actually, to be able to access IEPs. We do collect data from IEPs, the amount of service time, like the number of minutes, where a student gets the service, if they get ESY, extended school year services. There are data points that LEAs upload, but not IEPs. So IEPs are not something that is transferred in the backpack. There is some data about a student's services and supports, but not the actual IEP. Does that respond to your question, Vice Chair? Thank you.
I don't see any lights on. Member Davis.
Is any of that data would be considered skills or dispositions or knowledge that are non-academic? Would any of that data be considered from the backpack? Is the backpack even here? Where is the backpack? Katie.
That's
Dora
a great,
has the backpack. Katie has the
Deputy Jones, please.
The requirements of the law are as follows. The Student Achievement Backpack is a complete learner profile for students from kindergarten through grade 12. It is in electronic format, follows the student from grade to grade and school to school, and is accessible by student's parent or an authorized LEA user. The backpack itself is maintained at wherever the student is located in the SIS, right? We have different SISs out there, so not all of the LEAs have or are at the elements that are required in code for a backpack for a student. Hence the whole debate on one system versus disparate systems, and then the compromise that was the USIMS infrastructure, so that we would build the capability to move a complete IEP from one LEA to another if the student moved, which is happening now quite a bit, right?
Is that considered part of the backpack?
Well, no,
We have
she's right.
access.
The IEP is not listed as one of the elements in the backpack, I don't think. Maybe we need to check that. So no, it's not. However, it's required though. I mean, we get a lot of concerns by gaining teachers of the students that they don't get the IEP for months or weeks or those types of things. So we're trying to solve that problem with the infrastructure that is USIMS to be able to transfer that. However, LEAs are in different places with their IEPs. Some have digitized their IEPs, but many have not. They're still, which makes it more challenging to move an IEP from one LEA to another through the conduit that is USIMS. Does that help answer the question or provide clarity, or did I just confuse everybody more?
Member Davis, does that answer your question?
No, so the LEA has the backpack, but we gonna get the backpack and give it to another LEA. So while we have
If the
it,
student transfers.
if the student transfers, so while we have it, this motion says we're not gonna measure anything that's not academic.
But we only have it while we're transferring.
But we only have it while we're transferring it.
Is
We
there?
have a backpack here that attaches social scores to kids from the school climate survey, is that?
Not by definition, Chair, through you.
Please.
Not by definition. We don't have a student achievement or student backpack here at this level.
No profile?
Right? No, well, we can create, based on the data that we have, I'm sure we could create a learner profile. But remember, we deal in more disaggregated data than anything, right? So I don't, if we're concerned with, well, could somebody go in and completely know where the student's been, what they've done, all those types of things? No, I mean, store is not the right word. There's data in what we call the data gateway, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's data that we use for anything but reporting purposes or things that are required by code, right? So it's not we have never defined the data gateway as a student backpack or a student achievement backpack.
Thank you. We have Member Reel, and then Member Earl.
Thank you, Chair. I'm in opposition of this motion for a couple reasons. One, although I understand Member Bogus's intent here, one, I think it's difficult to explain what non-academic is. There's not a great definition for it, as you can see based on our discussion. Secondly, I think that when we are prioritizing our legislative requests, this to me does not fall in the top 100 things that I think we need to be prioritizing and requesting from the legislature, primarily because I do not think we can define it and explain it, and I think that it turns into a fool's errand. So I'm going to be in opposition of this motion. Thanks.
Thank you. Member Earl?
I should have wrote it down because I got thinking about what Sarah was saying. It was something that was just said by Scott, though, that I was like, I'm going to have to think now. Sorry. I should have wrote it down.
Well, let me. I want to restate this motion. But as you're thinking of your whatever, if it's another motion, Member Earl, or whatever it is, I want to ask the board, how long do we want to spend? Because we could spend a long time in this agenda item. We scheduled an hour and 45 minutes. Do we want to go to a specific time? I want to put this to the board. We still have agenda items to get through, and we still have an executive session. And so not trying to close debate on this or anything else, but I want the board to make a decision here. Do we want to go until 7:30 on this agenda item? Do we want to go until 7? It's 6:40 something right now. 6:47 right now. What's the consensus of the board? Any thoughts? Or we can just let this play out? I know we've got some amendments from Member Bogus. We've got some amendments from Member Davis, from Vice Chair Earl. And I think we'll have more opportunities throughout our weekly legislative sessions. Is that true? Is this where this is brought up in there as well? So anyway. Let's get your microphone going. So you have a point of order here.
Yeah, my point of order would be that, while your assertion is true, these motions can be made at any time. The legislative session moves hard and fast, and it would be extraordinarily disrespectful to our staff to have them running in the middle of the legislative session when we can do all these on the front end. And then there's a committee bill that, unless the legislature siphons off some of our policy requests, there's a committee bill that encompasses them all, and it's assigned to a specific legislator. So it would be more appropriate for the board to do their due diligence today.
So that's what I'm asking. Do you want to put a time limit on this, or do you want to just keep going? So can we give Member Earl a microphone?
Yeah, I would say 7:30 is our cutoff time today, but then we can continue tomorrow. We have a slot tomorrow for unfinished business. That's what I would say. And I did remember when we get.
Okay, I'll come back to you. Member Carey, go ahead.
Point of information, so when we say this item, are we referring to requests for statutory changes or also encompassing the requests for funding?
That's a great question. I was thinking of agenda item 12, but you're right. There's agenda items 12.2 and 12.3 have action items on both of those.
And I don't have an opinion, it was just a question. Thank you.
But this is the reality is what Member Carey's talking about. There's things to do here tonight, right? So with that in mind, I'll just keep in the back of my mind 7:30, and then once that time rolls around, we'll reapproach it and see what we want to do, okay? Member Earl.
Yeah, so the backpack, when you read the bill, and I don't love the backpack idea in general, but the backpack itself was intended for parents to reach in and have information on their children. We don't have that ability at the state level for a system that the parents get in and look in to a system. That's the intent of it. That's why you store this. It's to follow the kids so the parent at any time. Those are locally done. And so that's why I keep going. I don't think we have a state backpack. Do we store data? Yes. Do we, right? Is it transferred between different modalities or different requirements? Yes. But we don't have a mechanism that's set up for reaching in and taking stuff. The way that the backpack's designed, that's why it's called a backpack, is it's meant to be of the child and accessible for the parent. I think it's a great idea, though, to question what's in the required to be in a backpack and to update that language. So that I would be for that. I'm not sure, Len, here, just because it's the board's backpack, I'm not sure we have a backpack. So it's unclear to me what that even is. So
I've got Deputy Jones and then Member Bogus.
Okay, just for clarity, this gets into the thing. So we have data on students that dates back to 2004, and it's data that is defined as part of a student achievement backpack, but it's not consolidated or at the level of an LEA, right? That's what I mean by it's disaggregated. Now, could we go in there and create a backpack or pull that data for any individual student? Yes, we could create a backpack, but that's up to the LEAs to do that by definition of the law. That's what I was trying to say. So I don't want to make it. I think I might have not been clear enough, and I'm trying to clear this up, that yes, there's data up here at this level. It's in the data gateway, but we've never really defined it by the one each student as being their backpack, right? But we could go in and take a student's information and create one for them that meets all of the data elements that are listed in the code. So I hope that helps. I hope it's a little clearer.
Thank you. Member Bogus.
So I think we're off into things that the motion absolutely just doesn't say. It doesn't say storage, it says measure. And it doesn't say, like the backpack, it's got a qualifier, the collection system. So we're into spaces that the motion doesn't even touch. And so I would just ask that we leave the motion as it is and not go outside the motion.
Where is the backpack? I found the backpack. What do you want in the backpack? Where are we storing it?
So the motion then, if we come back to the motion, it is that the board directs staff to work with the legislature to amend section 53E-3-511 to prohibit the board from measuring student non-academic knowledge, skills, and dispositions as part of the board's student achievement backpack data collection system. Let's vote. Okay, that fails, that fails. We're missing 2 board members. We have 7 in favor, 6 in opposition. Those opposed are Member Davis, Member Lear, Member Bollinger, Member Reel, Member Wood, and Member Hymas. And we have Member Booth and Member Kelly are absent. Member... Yeah, if that's okay, yeah. Vice Chair Hart, yours up here. Go ahead.
I'd like to make the motion that the board direct staff to work with legislature to review the list of required elements of the student data backpack in 53E-3-511 and any other applicable sections of code and update as appropriate. I didn't get a second.
The motion then is to direct staff to work with legislature to review the list of required elements of the student data backpack in 53E-3-501 and any other applicable sections of code and update as appropriate. Do we have a second? Okay, we have a second. And do you want to speak to your motion?
No, I just think it needs to be reviewed. I also think that I almost took out elements because I do think we need an answer on whether or not we need to program the gateway to do exactly that, so that we need to know what the legislature expects for the student data backpack. Once Deputy Jones said his thing about data gateway being programmed so that there is a portal, so to speak, then I actually wonder if we need to just ask them to recommit to that student data backpack and redefine it so that we can be clear about the expectations to us. But I'll leave it at elements, and I think that conversation would come about just organically.
Thank you. We have Member Bogus and then Member Davis.
Sorry, I would just move to amend to strike the language and update as appropriate, and to bring it back to the board to look at the code language. which we could do in any one of our legislative meetings.
Let's make sure that that is your motion, Member Bogus.
Without objection.
Without objection?
Yeah.
Okay, that's the new motion then. The new motion is to direct staff to work with the legislature to review the list of required elements of the student data backpack in 53E-3-511 and any other applicable sections of code and bring any new proposed language to the board. Member Davis.
I just want to note that this is what I'm waiting for to then be able to go back and revisit what we just voted on, because I want to see all the requirements. I don't worry about dispositions. I think that's fine, but I worry that something in this list is going to be defined in a way that could be skills or knowledge that is non-academic but is still some part of code. That's my concern.
Thank you. Deputy Newey and then Member Bogus.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to make sure that I'm clear on this. So is the request to go to the legislature and have them, or a legislator, and have them review the statutory, or for us to gather that information and bring it back to you, what is in the code?
I'm going to turn to the maker of the motion on that one.
It doesn't matter what we think needs to be in the student data backpack. My intent is to ask a legislator to review that, or hopefully take it to committee and review and revise, so that we aren't going down some road from a list from 11 years ago trying to comply to something, and then we get to the end of the road and they're like, well, that's invasive and you shouldn't have put that in the backpack.
Okay, perfect.
11 years later.
Thank you. Member Bogus.
I have motions.
Thank you. Okay. So let's restate this motion. To direct staff, the motion before the board is to direct staff to work with the legislature to review the list of required elements of the student data backpack in 53E-3-511 and any other applicable sections of code and bring any new proposed language to the board. Let's go ahead and vote. That passes 12 in favor, 1 in opposition, that no vote being Member Reel. Next motion, Member Bogus.
Yes, sir. This is a three-part motion, but it all relates to each other. I move that the board direct staff to work with the legislature to amend section 53G-6-206 2A to remove the language, quote, resolve school absenteeism and school truancy issues. 3A and G to add the language only with expressed written informed parental consent, and section 53G-8-211 to remove the language fails to cooperate with the school authorities to resolve the school age child's attendance problems as required, and finally to unify these issues into a single code section so that we no longer have the chaos in our LEAs and among this board that resulted in today's conversation about 607.
Do we have a second? Second by Member Green. I'm going to repeat this motion as little as possible. So,
Would you like me to delineate it just smoking fast?
well, we have a motion. We have a second. Do you want to speak to your motion?
Just very quickly, the first one, 2A, that is an unrealistic expectation of our LEAs. They cannot be accountable for something for which they are not responsible. And I realize there's tiny mitigating language in there, but it's still not acceptable for our teachers and our principals and our institutions to be held accountable for something for which they are not responsible. There are issues in 3A and G wherein students have intervention protocols that are being put in place without express written informed parental consent. Implied consent is being used to execute those, and we need to ensure that we have parental consent. 53G-8-211 assigns to the student a label as a result of a parent's choice. And we should never put a label on a child because their parent perhaps did not meet the expectations of their institution. We've got to keep that distinct and only hold the child accountable for that which they are accountable, and not label them as a result of their parents' choice. And finally, I think that speaks for itself that we've got too many sections of code, and the code lines are all over the place, and I think a cleanup bill is warranted.
Thank you, Member Bogus. Board members, the motion before the board is on the board. So take a look. Member Lear.
Yeah, that's a good point. We do have an audit on this issue, related to this issue. And I think that might give us more information. That's one point. The second point, I think we are, and I don't know how we got, well, I mean, I've been a teacher too, so I know kind of how we got here. But on the one hand, I think we have very fickle expectations from sometimes from the legislatures and also from parents. Everybody expects the state board and of course LEAs to do something. We've seen a dramatic decrease in school attendance since it started before the pandemic, but it was stronger during the pandemic, and it hasn't really recovered. So on the one hand, we have policymakers and even parents say, do something about this. Fix this. Students aren't going to school. My children aren't going to school, regarding older children. And yeah, on the other hand, we've got parents who say, if I say it's an excuse, and don't you ask. So we can't even really encourage them meaningfully to attend school or have any consequences for not attending school. So this is a little bit not exactly to your motion, but I think until we somehow work with policymakers to resolve that kind of contradiction, dysfunction, something, that all of this is just is not going to work. It doesn't help. I just think we have to decide as an education community working with the legislature, do we want to put any teeth into getting students into school? And, you know, when I heard Member Carey make the motion about anytime a parent says it's an excuse, and no questions asked, which he's not wrong about in terms of that section of the code, I just want to throw my hands up and say, why are we even discussing truancy or chronic absenteeism? Because we don't have a unified approach to this. So I can't support this, and I can't support spending our time on it when we don't have, even among all these, the 15 board members, we don't have a consistent attitude about attendance is more important than what a parent says about a child, or vice versa. So I can't support that because I think we need a collective, strong voice about how important is attending public school. And you can attend so many ways. That's the other irony of it. But is it important or is it not?
Thank you, Member Lear. The motion before the board is, again, here in front of us. Hopefully the public can see it online as well. I think we are ready to vote.
So I hate to be a goober, but you actually have to read that out loud.
Nope. What's that? Yeah.
I'm not going to make fun of Matt. I'm not going to.
Yeah, here, Matt. All right.
I can't. Yeah, this.
I know it is. I know, and it's late. I should take my turn. I realize that. I'm sorry. The motion before the board is that the board direct staff to work with the legislature to amend first Section 53G 6206 2A, to remove language, quote, resolve school absenteeism and truancy issues, end quote. 3A and G, to add the language, quote, only with express written informed parental consent, end quote. And bullet point, section 32G8 to 11, to remove the language, quote, fails to cooperate with the part of school authorities to resolve the school-age child's attendance problem as required under 53F6206, end quote, and to unify into a single code section compulsory education, truancy, attendance, and excused, unexcused absences. That's the motion before the board. Please vote. There's a point to everybody's steam.
Okay, that passes with 9 votes in favor, 1 vote, or 4 votes against, excuse me, and it looks like Vice Chair Wood is a no, Member Bollinger is no, Member Reel is no, and Member Lear is no. So I'll tell you what, on these long ones, I'll read it at least once at the end. I won't make Vice Chair Hart do it.
No, I don't mind.
So it's all good. Okay. Where are we at? Member, I know that Member Davis, did you have one? Do we want to, is that okay, Member Bogus? Member Davis, and then we'll jump back to Member Bogus.
Do you have this one, Director or Deputy Nui? It's the teacher housing one. Thank you. I move that there's kind of a part for this, little part for the staff along with the statutory request, but I move that the board directs staff to include current teacher housing initiatives and incentives on the USBE website teacher retention page. And I move that the board support potential changes to first-time homebuyers incentives legislation to 1, include changes in the new construction requirement to allow previously owned homes and or first-time homebuyers expanded to include first-time single-family home, townhouse, or other buyers. Number 2, a seat on the Commission of Housing and Affordability representing the education community. And number 3, a study on nationwide public policy teacher housing initiatives.
Do we have a second for that? Second. Okay. You want to speak to your motion, Member Davis?
Sure, I'd be happy to. A group of stakeholders and I visited with some other states and tried to figure out what people are doing to innovate in this area. And our own state is doing a lot of innovation right now in the housing space. So this legislation is a little precarious in that, for example, it only allows for new construction in the first-time homebuyer incentive. So we would be asking for a little carve-out for teachers that a lot of teachers, quite frankly, I did this myself as a new teacher. They can only afford like a condominium right when they start teaching. So could their incentive, if they only get it one time, be to move from a condominium to a previously existing home, single family or townhome, and not brand new construction, and not be a very first time? So the same group also met with the head of the housing authority, which is Steve Waldrop, and talked about some of these questioned about if these were feasible ideas or not, and he felt that they were, along with the governor's education folks as well. So if you have questions about these, I'd be happy to elaborate more, but in the interest of time, maybe I should wait for some questions. But this could be really, really great for teachers, and it wouldn't cost a lot of additional money. It would just be shifting the code a bit to make things a little more specific for teachers.
Thank you. Member Lear?
Completely, totally think this is a very helpful idea. There are already school districts who've done this for years, Tooele, and in hard to staff and areas. Tooele has done it for years. San Juan has done it for years. And those are just the two I can think of off the top of my head. I think it is an excellent creative idea, and we should put the full weight of our board behind it, because the reasons teachers, and I shouldn't say they don't, that's why Park City pays their teachers so much, because most teachers can't afford to live there. So the only question might be, Cindy, is if you want to make it less specific and just more communicating our desire and our intent, and letting legislators come up with their own means to do this. And
Yeah, Member Davis' response?
Yeah, these, after meeting with all of these folks, was kind of the list that we came up with, and then the thought really is that we provide these as ideas, and legislators will or won't. I mean, they'll take one of them maybe, or two, or none, but
That's
even
great.
one or two would be really helpful.
oh, it's such a great idea. That's fine, however you want to do it.
I can't take full credit. It was made by a handful of people.
Thank you. Member Earl?
Yeah, I don't know that I necessarily disagree with the three ideas. I just, in general, there's been a few initiatives that the state's done over the last few years that really were beneficial for builders, for real estate agents, and not necessarily for law enforcement, for firefighters, for teachers, those that they were trying to help, because they ended up in the end taking something off the top when they sold and stuff. So in general, I think it is good that we have a seat. So I'm trying to weigh that out against what could be some really bad policy, right? Just because, like, it's is this the kind of the proper role kind of a thing? So, but I understand there are some complications with teachers and making sure we can help them get into housing. But there is for so many, I mean, my kids, right? So I don't know. I would, well, I could seat at the table. I just am kind of mixed on whether, I don't know, the direction in general.
Yeah, thank you. We do have Member Green and then Member Davis, but you want to respond to that? Is that okay, Member Green? Oh, your lights, I don't know what happened. Okay, Member Davis, we'll go to you then.
I'll just respond quickly. This would not create any new legislation. This is just within what's already existing. And we did talk about firefighters and police officers also. And the reason that the new construction piece is there is because of that builder lobby, for that very reason. And if they're going to do it, let those funds allow to really help folks and not just certain groups of builders.
Thank you. Member Carey?
Yeah, I like two of the three. I'm not a big fan of B. I'm assuming we're requesting a voting position on that commission, and we don't even have a voting position on the state charter school board, right? Right. I just think that it's a reach. I really don't want to make a motion to divide, but I do like A and C, but I just have some reservations about B. So despite the late hour, I would just make a motion to divide, and then we vote on A, B, and C separately.
Okay, so the motion before the committee is to divide? The motion before the board is to take B and vote on that separately. Okay, so motion then, getting ready.
Okay.
The motion before the board then is,
The motion before the board is that the board directs staff to
I guess we're just voting to divide, to pull.
Oh,
B.
we are going to do,
Yeah, I
I
think we
thought
need to
we just
vote for
pulled
that.
it without voting on it.
Yeah,
Okay.
well, is there any opposition to that? To just pulling B? No? Okay, let's move on. Will you read the motion? Thank you.
Absolutely. I'm,
Yeah, we will.
yeah. But first we're going to do A and C. So, oh, you want to do B first?
No, do A and C.
Okay. Will you scroll down so I can see A? The board directs staff to include current teacher housing initiatives and initiatives on the USBE website teacher retention page. That the board support potential changes to first-time homebuyers incentives legislation to A, include changes in the new construction requirement to allow previously owned homes and/or first-time homebuyers expanded to include first-time single-family home, townhome, or other buyers, and where did he go? Oh, and a study on nationwide public policy teacher housing initiatives.
Okay, that's the motion. I don't believe it needs to be seconded since we just divided. I believe Member Bogus is in the queue, so let's go ahead and vote. Okay, that passes. 11 in favor, 2 in opposition. Those no votes are Member Green and Member Bogus. Let's look at the next motion.
Thank you. That the board support potential changes to first-time homebuyers incentives legislation to grant USBE a seat on the Commission of Housing and Affordability representing the education community.
Member Davis.
Just said a member of the education community, and I don't even know who's in charge of the housing commission, but they could choose someone. It's just for communication. Like, for example, when we went and met with the commissioner, we didn't even know there's a development in Ogden that apparently is really new and great, and teachers have a little part in it, and we didn't even know to be able to communicate it out. Or it's just really for communication purposes, not to advocate that more is done. So much is being done on this front. It's just to make sure we know what's happening and have a seat there so that we can communicate as well. And if other folks, firefighters and such, are included, we would hope that teachers would be as well, if there are any carve-outs.
Thank you, Member Davis. Member Lear.
It's a little bit like the issue of impact fees. They're usually not allowed, but just knowing, being in the educators being in the room to explain the plight of their salaries, in some cases their the uncertainty of their positions and that kind of thing is, I think, immensely helpful.
Thank you, Member Lear. Member Green.
I'll admit there's a lot about this I don't know, but I'm just thinking of all those small businesses that don't have housing built into their realities. They have plights too, you know. This is just okay. Like,
Will you use your microphone? Thank you.
They're all included in this already. The difference is that a lot of teachers start in like a condominium already, and they're precluded from what all the small business owners have access to.
in what way?
Because they're forced to be a first-time home buyer. So if a teacher buys a little 2-bedroom condominium, one teacher that went with us has 3 kids in a little 2-bedroom condominium. He would really like to access this like the small business owners and everybody else can access, but he needs like a townhouse or a single family home, but he can't access it because on his salary he was able to get a condominium. So we're just asking for a little flexibility, whereas teachers have a set salary, a small business owner doesn't. You know, there's no, it doesn't matter how many hours you work, you're still going to get this amount of money. And usually you can only get like a condominium. Oh, both.
Thank you. Follow-up? I mean,
We should talk.
Yeah,
Okay.
I kind of have the same, I agree with Member Carey's, I hear what you're saying. I don't know if I'm ready to vote to try to get somebody on that commission. You know, add a seat on the Commission of Housing and Affordability. So that's where I am. That's where my heartburn lies. But we can vote if we're ready. I don't see any other comments here. Let me just restate the motion, and we'll put it to a vote here. So the motion is that the board support potential changes to first-time homebuyers incentives legislation to add a seat on the Commission of Housing and Affordability representing the education community. Let's go ahead and vote. And that motion fails with 8 against and 4 votes in favor, those being Member Reel, Member Davis, Vice Chair Wood, Member Lear, and we have Member Kelly and Member Booth and Vice Chair Hart absent. Okay, Member Bogus.
That the board request staff to work with the legislature to amend subsection 53G-6-8039A to add the following language. 4 is a computer adaptive assessment, or 5 is an assessment that an LEA or school administers in lieu of an assessment described in subsections 1 through 4.
Thank you. Do we have a second to that? Second by Member Green. Would you like to speak to that, Member Bogus?
So this is the code line that allows parents to opt out of like the RISE assessment, and this would allow codified language that says they can opt out of any computer adaptive assessment or an assessment that is given in lieu of an assessment that they've already opted out of.
Thank you. Can I ask, I guess, staff, I'm just wondering, I thought we'd already covered this 5. Yeah, I mean, I don't think you can say, oh, you opted out of this computer adaptive test, right? Or whatever. I'm going to give you another one of this similar nature. I thought we'd covered that.
So you
Somebody call Angie. Go
it's
ahead, Member
happening.
Bogus.
That's the ongoing issue.
If it's happening, if we've covered it and it's happening, that's a different issue
So I
than going
don't-
to the legislature. That's my
I
assumption,
do
but go
apologize.
ahead.
It's not covered in code.
I
We've
see.
had the conversation in this room. We've made our assertions, but we have not made action for policy change.
Thank you. Darren, do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, Darren Nielsen, Assistant Superintendent of Student Learning. Former Deputy Stallings and myself had the privilege of meeting with Board Member Bogus, and we worked through this language. As I understand the intent, and it came up in a previous board meeting where you'd requested, as we were reviewing 404, I think, and the parental exclusion opt-out form. The concern that was raised by Board Member Bogus is that, as she's articulating, when a parent completes the parental exclusion form, their student's then not going to participate in whatever assessments on that form they indicate. Some schools or LEAs will administer a LEA developed an assessment, and in lieu of that, and this is an effort to try to put some controls around that practice and honor the parents, I think, as you described, the parents' intent to opt out of an end-of-course assessment, and honor that, require that be honored.
Thank you. Member Earl?
And I'm just recalling, because we had this conversation, and I mean, even the parents' right, under the code for right of conscience, right, that we had already discussed this, that they can. So, I don't know, maybe you already said something like that, but it's there. And I guess if we're having violations of that, that's something that we need to maybe deal with, but anyways.
Okay, thank you.
Computer.
Well, I don't know if it's necessary. I mean, you're welcome to. I've got Vice Chair Wood first, and then I can go to Member Bogus.
So I did reach out to a charter school just to ask them, because they have a very, very high opt-out rate, what this does to them if they cannot offer an in lieu test over the statewide assessment. And they said, I would be opposed to that on the basis of local control and removing a school's ability to track student progress. We require the MAP test because such a high percentage of our students opt out of the state test, like 65%. If we couldn't require the MAP test, we would have no nationally normed tests to use as data points for how students are performing. Then I have no valid, reliable third-party data to points that show how students are performing. So in our work towards academic excellence, if we have no way to track what our kids are doing, there's no accountability. How do we know that they're performing, that our programs are working, that we're putting taxpayer funds towards those things that are valid for our students?
Member Bogus.
Thank you, sir. So I would offer, this doesn't say they can't offer something. It says they can't require it. That if a parent opts out, that opt-out goes all the way to the finish line. And then the other thing is I know Board Member Earl brought up the 205 code. And the response to that 205 code is nothing in code precludes us from requiring this for you. And then kids are taken out of class and put in the library, and parents aren't called, and they're just told to take this test. And then parents are calling me after the fact saying, I said no, and they locked my kid in the library and made him take this test. And I'm not certain that there's not some hyperbole in that statement. But the reality is, a parent says under the 205 code, my child should not have to take this assessment because it's in lieu of the one that I've already said no to. And LEAs are not responding, honoring that parent's choice. And their excuse for not honoring that parent's choice is nothing in code says they have to. And so this is language we need for clarity, and we need to honor that the parent is the primary arbiter of their child all the way to the finish line.
Thank you, Member Bogus. The motion before the board is that the board requests staff work with the legislature to amend subsection 53G-6-8039A to add the following language. 4 is a computer adaptive assessment, or 5 is an assessment that an LEA or school administrators or administers in lieu of an assessment described in subsections 1 through 4. Let's cue it up for a vote. Okay, that motion fails. 7 against, 5 in favor. Those in favor are Member Carey, Member Brinton, Member Hall, Member Green, and Member Bogus. I just read this off, but I think, so we're at 7:31. would we like to keep going? The reason I ask is we have to decide, again, what are we going to carry forth tomorrow? We still, I mean, if we look at the calendar, or if we look at the agenda, we have general consent, and then we have executive session, and essentially that's it. So we're close. So I don't know how to get this, and maybe I'm going to ask. Yeah, Kelsey, go ahead. Well, I'm asking. I want to know. I want to do what the board wants to do.
If
You
I
know
could
what I mean?
just provide just a point of information for the board, as you look at the rest of your agenda, if members are online tomorrow, which I'm guessing there will be at least more than there are right now, they cannot participate in executive session per our board bylaws. So that's one consideration into whether you want to have executive session tonight or tomorrow.
Thank you. Member Bogus, go ahead.
I would just say with that consideration, I would move to table agenda items 12.2 and 12.3 until tomorrow.
So the motion before the board is to table agenda items 12.2 and 12.3 to tomorrow's overflow meeting. I don't know what we
Yes.
call it. So we got a second from Member Carey. Would you like to speak to that motion, Member Bogus?
No, sir, I think it's in the presupposition.
Thank you. Is there any opposition to that motion? No opposition. We're going to move that to tomorrow.
I
Thank
just want to
you.
make certain it says 12.2 and 12.3.
We just said 12.2 and 12.3, so we're going to move on now to 12.4.
Oh, there it is. I apologize, sir.
And thank you for that motion and second, and thank you, board members. Let's look at 12.4, information item, and we're going to invite Deputy Superintendent Scott Jones up. Unless he's already eaten, and then...
Okay, what's going on here? Now I'm tall enough. Okay. What, Deputy Superintendent of Operations Scott Jones, which agenda item are we on, sir?
We're on 12.4, information it says December 9, 2024, executive appropriations update.
Yes, so would you recognize Director Yuri and Dr. Nestor Rodriguez to come forward, please, sir, for the presentation?
You know it.
And we'll be fast. While they're getting set up, just to give some background on this, the Executive Appropriations Committee for the Utah Legislature met in early December, approximately December 6th or 9th. I can't remember the exact date. That December meeting is very, very important because it's in that meeting where basically they get a pretty detailed revenue update, and it sets conditions for what eventually becomes the base budget bill for public education, which we're working jointly on with the LFA as we speak. And Nestor is here so that you are all duly informed on where we stand for revenue going into the session 2 as it matches or equals what is the understanding of your colleagues in the legislative body. The key takeaway with this also, as you get into your request for funding, is right now our request for funding exceed the amount of availability of funds likely for public education for new funds for FY26. I'm not asking or recommending any changes to it, but I think you all should be cognizant of that, and what I just said will be supported by what you are presented here today. Very important information because, again, it sets conditions for and together as we move into the legislative session. So you guys ready? Yeah. Okay.
Hello, board.
Happy holidays. Hope your holiday was great. So, which one are you gonna put? Nestor Rodriguez, economist. Put it up.
Sam Uri, School Finance Director.
And so, as Scott said, we're just going to go over some numbers. They're a bit dated, and I think you'll be happy to hear some of the new numbers that we've gotten recently are better, if you will, better news, given monthly summary from the TC23 tax report. And so as we load up the slide, I think we're loading it up. Okay. It's also in the board backups. It was just recently updated. Cammie just recently updated it as well. So it should be there. So if you want to pull that up, but yeah, no. So if you could pull it up, it's on the board backup. There's a few documents there. We'll just be going through the PowerPoint.
Nestor's not coming up yet.
Okay, I'll just start talking. But yeah, if you're looking online, the monthly TC23 update, we just got a new one in December, so this is going to be dated, and this is in line with what Scott was referring to before, with LFA and GOPB and the like. As well, Utah Economic Council, that, at least from what I've seen, garnered has not come out the new updates, but getting a sense from recent economic news, the new year, and the holiday was, relatively optimistic in terms of sales, and that will drive us into the fourth quarter or drive us through the fourth quarter. So on that end, I think you get a sense, and from some of the preliminary reports, because the holiday is sort of has been transformed, and also between dates and returns, and also online versus in-person shopping and the like. But everything on the surface, at least, looks positive, which is good. And then we're going to continue our discussion, as Scott had mentioned earlier, with regard to ongoing versus one-time funds. The sense of where now, unlike in October, we have more information. We have a sense where LFA stands, but we did get the governor's recommendation with regard to the budget, which was important in the sense of where we're standing and where they think we're standing, and that's a good thing. More information, as information is revealed, we're more informed, and we get a sense and idea of where we'll be. So, with that said, I really want to move forward. If you're looking at it, yeah, this is right here, I think. I want to move forward to really just highlight what happened in December. There it is. The December. So if you move forward in the slides, that's what I kind of went over real quick. But what happened in December? There's a TC23. I kind of just took a snapshot of it and put it in the slides. But that's the more recent tax update. And what's important to understand there, so keep going. What's important to understand, sort of, if you compare November's TC23, which I would have gone over in December, to what we see now, there was a statement in the November TC23 summary. This is a summary stipulating that they were concerned. In my world, sort of a statement like was presented at the towards the bottom of the generality of the entire document. Over the coming months, state economists will need to closely monitor the revenue effects of recent trends and policy changes, including interest rate cuts and softening labor market. In layperson speak, economists try to be sort of just fair and not be very, not that they're not being definitive, but they definitely just, they're looking at this, and that's what they did there. Well, if you look at the December, which you keep going here, keep going. So that's the statement I just made there. That was November, but you keep going. They have actually, in the December monthly revenue snapshot, you're not going to be able to see it here, I think, but they made some adjustments to these numbers that are more optimistic and more in line with what they were expecting, and not as negative as they would have been. So in the next slide, so that's good. But still not great. All right, thank you, Sam. But on the other hand, the idea being that just, we're being judicious here. And I think all parties involved, including the other entities, are being judicious about where we are. And we also have to keep in mind and I know this sounds cliche-ish, there's uncertainties, right? And now we have a new administration at the federal level coming in less than 2 weeks. There's just a lot of uncertainties. And with that, there's going to be a bit of change in terms of at least the administration, not to mention their policies. So folks are just uncertain. But between LFA, GOPB, the EAC meeting, everybody is very positive about where we stand. And that's a good thing in the sense of we're in a good spot. And again, we just need to look back at COVID. The Utah economy fared well compared to the rest of the country. And so, that's something to keep in mind. And that said, skip over this because if you look, what I was kind of suggesting, go back one slide. What I was suggesting was that there was a bit of a downturn here, but that has sort of alleviated. And I think there's just a bit of caution, and there's and that's something I didn't iterate the last time we met. But to think about is we have to consider what consumers and producers have been through in the last, go back a ways, maybe 10 years. There have been some dramatic macro events. And so when we consider they sort of, there's been sort of been whipsawed, if you will, the fact that we're relatively speaking in an okay place is good. So we sort of have to keep this in mind as well. So keep going, next slide. And so this is from the Utah Economic Council. And so they're predicting that this is from what has happened in the past. And again, as you can see, Utah's real GDP, gross domestic product, that's overall economic activity in the state, has superseded what's been happening across the country. Next slide. And these are just the indicators that these are all publicly available. And I was waiting for it. It was going to be a new update in October. Nevertheless, the trend seems to be continuing in the sense that they're predicting that Utah will continue to sort of supersede the rest of the country. Next slide. And so this is the latest economic update now, the third quarter. The fourth quarter initial estimate will be out at the end of the month. That is what BEA, Bureau of Economic Analysis, is predicting. But again, if there's if anything, any indicator based on what we saw with the holiday season, I don't anticipate these numbers to fall off at all. Next slide. And then as you can see here, and I iterated this in October, and it continues. And the Federal Reserve has seemed to have been able to perform this what we call soft landing, in that they've raised interest rates, but at the same time have not caused the economy to stall, if you will. Next slide. And so again, this is just a graphic showing that. Next slide. And so this was just iterating what had happened over the holiday season. These were preliminary numbers. Nevertheless, the numbers have come out very optimistic, or the numbers have been optimistic. So that's something to sort of keep in mind as we ride into the first quarter of the new year. Next slide. And then with that said, and this is going to what Scott was iterating before, what I want you to focus on are the trends. And we have some data now because we're going to have a third data point, if you will, in that when you look at ongoing versus one time, what's been appropriated versus what's been requested, the focus seems to have shifted to more one-time funds as opposed to ongoing. And that's something to sort of keep in mind. Also, next slide now, we had initiated these three scenarios, and now we have information from the governor's office, as well as LFA to some extent, about where we stand with regard to that inflationary adjustment and statutory enrollment growth ongoing. And so we feel that the possibility of that first low scenario is far-fetched now. On the other hand, we still urge caution because, go ahead, next slide. I think the medium scenario is more likely, but certainly this high scenario, the high range, is something that we just put up there just for comparison's sake. But nevertheless, we just believe at this point we have more information, we see where we're going, but certainly the idea being focusing more on those one-time monies as opposed to ongoing. Next slide. And so that is really, the trend continues to encourage caution, and that's just because we've had a series of macroeconomic events over these years. We have a new administration coming in on the federal level, and so, we'll let that bear out. Nevertheless, the state is in a good place, and this is coming from several entities, stating that as far as reserves go, and the like, we're in a good place. We just need to be judicious about where we want to go. And then I just want to go back. You want to go back to the first? The first one? Remember when I told you this one?
Oh, the comparison. It's a different document.
If you can go to, it's a different document. It's the comparison. And it's just to stress with yeah. It's just to stress this notion of where we stand and what we're seeing. And what we're seeing is, again, this emphasis more on one-time monies versus ongoing funds. And we saw this last year, so now we have another data point to see that. And it's just something to think about in terms of priorities, spending, and the like. So I think this is pretty informative, and then this will I think it'll be updated in the near future with more information as we get it, so that we can also get a sense of where we've been, where we're going, where we're going to continue to go, because this will probably be the second year that we've seen this. So with that said,
and if we could just pause there, Chair, if you were to take any piece of information or data out there, I would take this slide out. It enables you to, as discussions are made amongst your constituents, and if by chance you're in the any legislative committees, PEA, EAC, or you're listening in on it, there'll be references to the one-time versus ongoing statuses. So all of the slides are great. They provide a lot of data, but you notice we started at the higher level, went down into the different scenarios that were excellently put together by them. So these are good references for you, especially if you're hearing language along the lines. Yes, overall as a state, we're in good shape, but policy drives everything, right? Where we're a state that does emphasize having reserves, those types of things, that does put us in good shape, but that means that money is set aside. And that's fine. There's no criticism of that. But then that means that money is not available for other things, right? So, and there we are, with more emphasis on income tax is cyclical, right? It goes up, down. It depends on a lot of the pressure points, if you will, of the economy. So this is I thought this was a great table that Esther put together. Thank you.
And let me just iterate what Scott said there. Yes, that you have many programs that are identified there. And again, information is revealed. We see where we stand. And this would, as Deputy Jones has mentioned, would make for very good conversation points to be had or made or discussed. So I can't overemphasize this slide in the sense of its importance for moving forward, not only moving forward now, but even into the future, because if you could think about ongoing versus one time, right? And the impact of, if you just think of it just from a dollar, from a time value money standpoint, for some of these programs, this is something to think about.
Thank you. We have a question from Vice Chair Hart.
Actually, it's, I know how I felt when I saw this presentation as a first-time board member, and I know that the presentation, like you might just pick out a few words. You're like, oh, I know that word. Don't really understand the sentence, but I understand the word. This slide right here, I printed off and had in my materials when I went up or when I thought I would be running into any legislator. And I kept looking at this slide, and it kept grounding me in kind of feeling like maybe I knew a little tiny bit of what I was talking about. So I do think that this slide is really important. Also, don't think that everybody around you understands what a very skilled economist just shared with us. Go home, listen to it again. You still won't understand it. Probably won't even understand it during next legislative session, but the third time's a charm, and it is really good information. And you know more than you think you do, actually. It just, I know, feels, it's just so foreign, the amounts of money we're talking about and the pots of money we're talking about. And then, bless their hearts, and I apologize to every legislator out there, some of them don't know what we're talking about too. But I would like Dr. Dixon or Deputy Jones, will you talk about the role of an economist on our staff? Because some people might go, an economist? That's interesting. Talk to us about the history of that and how I think it's absolutely fabulous and wonderful. And with such a large percentage of Utah's budget, we have a responsibility to understand these trends, understand where things are going, make sense of what's out there. It puts us in a much better position. But will one of you two speak to the history of that?
Okay, yeah. So the history of this is and I'm sure you've seen this too, the GOPB and the LFA have had economists on their staff, and more than just one, for years. And what we had struggled with for a long time was getting to this point that we are now, which is by having an economist, the capability to make sure that you become more informed, more duly informed about the data and information from an economic perspective that goes into the decision making by the legislature. Nestor is an integral part now, or relationship with the economists, both at GOPB and the LFA economists as well. So when we go to make all of the estimates, the formulas, those types of things, having that perspective is a value add to the overall process of determining where funding should go for public education in conjunction with all of the other experts and expertise that you see out there. So that's Nestor, how long have you been here now? Only about 3 years, right? So we never had an economist up to this point, and we were missing that key piece or that key side of, well, you know, where is the revenue? What is driving the decision to fund the WPU at these percentages? And Nestor provides that additional capability to you as the board. So does that help summarize that, or where we were and why we have such a great economist in Dr. Rodriguez?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Seeing no other lights, we just want to thank you, Nestor, Sam, Scott. We appreciate what you do here and that you're available for questions at any time.
For the record, no, I have a great team, by the way. This guy, and Sam Urey, school director, but Dale Frost and Brett Baker, by the way, they're a great team. We work together. We pick each other up. We have different skill sets, different abilities, different things that push us, right? And so, no. And great leadership, of course, obviously here too. But no. It's a very supportive, great work environment, great projects, great ideas. And I love board meetings. I tell Sam I watch them all the time. So, no. I do. I actually do. I do.
He was so excited to give this update in December. I mean, he wanted to record a video and send it to all of you so that you could watch it. So he's real excited.
I know.
I did want to offer as well, if there is anything in the backups that you review that you have questions on, please reach out to us, whether you're a board member or the public. We'd be happy to do that. And just one point, if I may, at the very bottom of this document, the totals there, our ongoing requests here at USBE are almost double what really is available right now. So just kind of that, and Scott's referenced that as well, but that's kind of why we keep referencing the ongoing versus the one time. So there on the left, the 377 million in USBE ongoing requests are about double what is actually available right now in ongoing revenue. So anyway.
Thank you.
Just to, sorry, your time, but just to think about that ongoing versus one time, okay, and the impact that those funds would have, and what seems to be what we've been prioritized here versus what other entities are. Think about where this would make for good discussion in the sense of some of these programs and what it seems to be is that one-time funds are being offered versus what we've thought with regard to one-time versus ongoing on our end. So just something to think about.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay.